For years, the business model for local journalism has rested on three legs: advertising, subscriptions, and more recently, philanthropy. But what happens when a fourth leg starts to emerge? One driven not by the market, but by public policy. We're now seeing tens of millions of dollars flowing into local newsroom through state legislation, tax credits, fellowships, and government-backed initiatives, according to new data from Rebuild Local News's inaugural annual report. This isn't theoretical anymore. It's real funding, real impact, and it's already shaping how local journalism gets sustained. So today we're digging into that shift, what it means, who benefits, and whether this is a lifeline or something far more complicated. And joining me for his fifth, count 'em, fifth appearance on EMP Reports is someone right at the center of this movement. Welcome back, Steven Waldman. It's an honor to have you back, sir.
It's an honor to be here. You are the first thing I read in the morning. Your ENP is indispensable, so I'm always pleased to be here.
The question I really want to ask is, how come you keep looking younger and skinnier and I keep getting older and fatter? It must be something.
You have the amazing filters you can put on these cameras now.
Well, Steven, I just want to introduce you to those who may not know you. You're president and co-founder of Rebuild Local News, one of the leading voices shaping public policy around the future of local journalism. You're a longtime journalist, digital media innovator, one of the earliest architects behind Report for America. We had you on back in those days before Rebuild Local News. And if there's a national conversation happening about local news, you seem to always be in the center of it. You've been on 60 Minutes, am I right? And
yes.
CNN and all that. All right, so tell you what, we're going to take a break so we can make some money. When we come back, we're going to break down what this new fourth leg really looks like for local publishers and whether they're ready to stand on it. Stick around, we'll be right back.
Hello, my name is Walter Hussman. Our family has been in the news business for over 100 years. Journalism includes two parts: reporting the news and providing opinions. But in recent years, there's been too much opinion appearing in news reporting. This has eroded public trust in news reporting to the lowest level of any U.S. institution. To address this, we started a nonprofit, the Center for Integrity in News Reporting.
The Center for Integrity in News Reporting, CFINR, is on a mission to rebuild public trust in journalism, one newsroom and one classroom at a time. We champion the effort to have news organizations and journalism schools create and prominently display their own clear, concise statements of core journalistic values. Learn more by visiting the Center for Integrity and News Reporting site at cfinr.org.
Steve, let's start here. Are we officially at the point where public policy is becoming the fourth leg of the local news business model?
Yes, I think we're there. And you're right to cast it that way, because no one is suggesting that public policy become the only or even main thread to this, but it is in fact an important leg of the stool now.
For years, publishers were told to innovate their way out of the news crisis and sustainability. Is this report essentially saying the market alone can't fix local news? There's got to be more ways to do the fix we need?
Yeah, in a way that's true. I think the market will sustain local news in lots of places or portions of it, but we are recognizing that some aspects of local news are basically a public good, and they're really important to communities, and they might not be entirely supported sufficiently by earned revenue. And in cases like that, you need philanthropy and public policy. That's not a new idea. That's what we do with schools and hospitals and libraries. What's new is for us to think of it that way about local news. That is a bit of a change in our thinking. I will point out that, we don't really like to talk about it, but there has been government support for news and local news for a long time. Whether it's public notices or the newspaper subsidies, and not even, counting public broadcasting. So we've been doing it a little more than we think, but I do think this is a new era where we are coming to grips with the fact that there are certain parts of community news that really are a community benefit that taxpayers need to help support too.
Kind of a shift in the paradigm, isn't it? Where we're not just an industry, we are an industry cited in the Constitution as one that's necessary uh, in this Madisonian democracy. So a way that you can justify it that way. We could get into so many dynamics, but what I love about the report, which we will allow our audience to get, it's going to be free and it's there, and you just come to the landing page. You cite a number. You cite more than 129 million. That's a lot flowing into local news through state action. What surprised you most about how fast this number grew?
Well, it kind of added up from different places. Like I was looking at each state and thinking, okay, that's a little bit of progress there. But it wasn't until we put it all together and saw how a little bit here and a little bit there really added up to a very substantial number. I mean, you're talking in the same, general ballpark of what philanthropy is putting in already. And this is from 6 states. So, and by the way, I'll say that the 121 million was basically up until 2025. Just this year in 2026, our estimate is going to be that 74 million will go out to local newsrooms just in 2026 from laws that were enacted in 6 states. So it's not hard to imagine how, if this really becomes a movement and we get it in many, many states or ultimately have federal legislation, that this could really become a significant piece of the puzzle.
Like we'll drill into the states in a moment and what local publishers may be able to do to support that. But let's follow the money for a second. Where is that money actually going? Who's benefiting? Legacy publishers, nonprofits, startups, digital only? Who's getting this money, Steve?
All of the above. And of course, each law is a little bit different, but I'll give you an example. Like Illinois, there are 3 states that have passed what we call employment tax credits: New York, Illinois, and just recently New Mexico. Illinois is really the fastest out of the gate. They're already into round two. So we can see what happened in the first round. It was $4 million to retain reporters and another million for new hires. And the distribution was really interesting because it was about 2/3 of it went to staffs that were 6 people or smaller. So it was not going mostly to big players. And it was also not going mostly to Chicago, which was interesting because one of the limitations of philanthropy is it tends to be concentrated in cities, in the big cities. This seems to be getting out to small rural papers and websites more. And it was also a real mix of for-profits and nonprofits. I think 1/3 of the beneficiaries were nonprofits, including public radio as well as the digital nonprofits. So I think it'll be different in each place, and also depending, each policy is a little different and has slightly different preferences to it. But our approach is always to have it be broad. Like we want policies that lift up the whole local news system, not cherry picking only nonprofits or only newspapers or only TV stations. We really believe that, lifting up all the boats is the way to go. It'll get more money into the system. It's more fair. And I also think that politically it will be more durable.
Let's talk about this 13-to-1 ratio in policy investment. That's fascinating because I was a state media association president back in my youth. And I remember so many times when I was asked to put up the bat signal, get everybody on the phones, get the list out. How important is it for local publishers today to invest in advocacy and lobbying to get a return on this right now, Steve, in your
I
opinion?
think it's very important. That's why we kind of, made that estimate was as a message partly to the philanthropic world, but everyone else is involved, is that this really pays off in very concrete dollars and cents terms. It's not easy and it takes time. It's not like some things where, you invest one month and you see the payoff the next month or something. Sometimes it takes years before you have a hit on a public policy effort, as you know. But in the long run, it really does pay out. By the way, this is kind of obvious to every other sector of the economy. If you talk to people in trade associations,
Oh,
in healthcare or the environment or anything else, it was like, well, yeah, obviously you have to do public policy. That's where you have these huge systemic changes that come out of it. We have not really done that for good reasons. Like, let's talk about the First Amendment. Like, there's very good reasons for our industry to be cautious about going into public policy. And, our group, Rebuild Local News, takes that really seriously. And we are always running every policy we work on through a First Amendment filter and making sure, that it holds up. And I think it does. But we don't think that's a ridiculous concern. It's just one we think is very solvable.
Well, money that's given and then taken away is a way for a government to influence the journalism. And obviously we have to maintain our independence. That goes without saying. But here's the million-dollar question, at least in my brain. How do you define news? Who gets the money, who doesn't? Does the local, newspaper with a 150-year-old brand in that small county get help along with the blogger in the basement with cats? I mean, who is the journalist and where does the money flow? Has that been a problem in defining the recipients, Steve?
I'd say it's a challenge in defining the recipients, and we work on that a lot. We try to keep stretching the definition to new forms of very legitimate journalism. We really do try. That blogger in the basement with cats may, in fact, be a great journalist. Just because it's a blogger in the basement doesn't mean that they're not, they might be the one that's actually covering the city council. So we're not going to rule them out just because they spend too much time in their pajamas. But there is also tons and tons of fake, pink slime websites out there. So you do have to be really smart about how you draw the lines. So in the case of like the employment credit that I mentioned, the benefit is tied to the number of reporters or journalists that you have. And so and there's definitions of what that means. And it has to be full-time and it needs to be covering the community. And then we have a bunch of other filters. And to be honest, no one of these filters is really foolproof that's going to like work perfectly. But it does appear that if you add up all the it's like Swiss cheese, a loaf of Swiss cheese, the holes are all in a different place. So it's solid. So we require that the news organization have at least one full-time journalist in the area. So that knocks out a lot of the pink slime sites. That they have media liability insurance, that they disclose their ownership, that they can't be run by or controlled by a 501c4, meaning a political organization, or a PAC. So we'll keep working on those filters, but because we do want to be sure to include the new players. It would be much easier if all we had to do is point the subsidy to newspapers that have a postal permit or TV stations that have a FCC license. That would make our lives a lot easier, but that's not our world.
That's not the ecosystem today. I agree completely. Now, what is this local journalist index you've launched? What is it doing, and how does that matter in today's world?
Yeah, this is we are huge fans of the Medill annual news report. We use it a lot. It's been incredibly powerful and important in helping to document the collapse of local news. It focuses on the number of outlets. And we believe that in addition to looking at the number of outlets, to really get a picture of what's going on, you have to look at the number of journalists. And the reason is, first of all, in more densely populated areas, you can have an outlet and still have horrible coverage. If you have, like the Bronx has 1.5 million people and, a couple of outlets and a handful of reporters. So they're getting bad coverage as, a rural county that doesn't have much of anything. So we wanted to factor that in. We also wanted to be sort of future friendly and say, in the future, there may be journalists that are really important and doing good work that aren't affiliated with a newspaper in the traditional sense. So at the end of the day, how much reporting you have, how many journalists you have in your community is maybe the most important measure. Like that's where you're really getting down to, is your community getting covered or not?
All right, so we're getting near the end of our dialogue here. I'm a local publisher listening to this on Spotify, watching it on YouTube. What can I do today, right now, to help build this new leg on my stool so I got a better chance of hitting my bottom line numbers and keeping my business going?
Reach out to us. We build local news. And first we'll tell you if there's something going on in your state already, we'll plug you into that. Our view, we're not coming in and trying to create whole new bureaucracies. We tend to like try to find the folks in a state that are, ready to lead and we help them. So if that's happening in your state, we will connect you with them. And if it's not, we might try to convince you to take the lead or at least, be part of a system because the way political advocacy works, you need to pull together a bunch of publishers like that or other stakeholders. Not and that's another thing, by the way, is that some of these successful efforts are moving beyond just getting the publishers to advocate and getting other people in the community who are now realizing that like, oh yeah, the whole community hurts when you don't have local news.
Didn't we have you on this very program with Zach Richner and the work that came through? It started up through a local publisher in New York State.
Exactly.
And is that still
Exactly.
going on? Are they benefiting today from that in New York State as
Well,
well?
it's New York is as a New Yorker, I find this very embarrassing. New York and Illinois passed their laws like the same month practically, and Illinois is about 2 years ahead of New York in implementing it. The first case in American history when Illinois is the model of good government and efficiency.
True.
But they've done a really good job. New York, for various reasons, has been slow, but they have issued the regulations. The applications are now in, and I think money's actually going to start to flow this year in New York. The other thing in New York City that we've talked about the employment credit and the small business credit. The two other things that are getting traction. One is a familiar idea to you, which is government advertising, pushing government advertising more towards local news. You've had on the New York City people who really
Yeah.
pioneered this approach. Well, just a couple weeks ago, Maryland became the first state in the country to create a statewide requirement, like the New York City one, that says 50% of the state advertising from Maryland should go to local news. So that's a great approach because it doesn't involve any new money. And then the last thing I'll say is fellowships. So this is actually a lot like Report for America, except funded by the state. Report for America is all private money. But in California, New Mexico, and Washington, they basically did the same thing. The journalism schools ran a program, recruited great young journalists, put them in the newsrooms, and I think there's 40 of them in the field now in California, and it's funded by the state, and that's like very First Amendment friendly. There's great distance between the politicians and the journalism. So, those are the four we're seeing getting the most traction so far.
Are you optimistic? Final question. I am. I get up every morning believing in the mission. Are you optimistic? Are we just, when you pull something like this off or it gets done in a state, are we just buying time or do you see a future for local journalism thriving in our society?
I am optimistic. I really do see a future and I wouldn't have said that 5 years ago. Whenever our first call was, I probably was in a worse mood because you had all the evidence of the collapse and there just weren't as many green shoots, There weren't as many models of either in the legacy media doing innovation and adjustment or of the new players. There just wasn't as much of it. Now there's a lot. Now, not all of it is working, but some of it is. Like you had, I think, Ken Doctor on recently. That's a great example. Like it not only did this brand new thing win the Pulitzer Prize, my favorite part of it is last quarter they broke even.
Right.
And so, yeah, there's no reason why Outlook Santa Cruz can't be forever, or at least maybe not forever, but for a long time. And I do think it's going to be a mix of different revenue, absolutely earned revenue, still some advertising, philanthropy, and yes, some taxpayer support.
Well, the report, and you say it correctly, it's an inaugural annual report. You can't say first annual. I learned that years ago when I got slapped down. So, but
Wait, why can't you do that?
you cannot say first annual. It's because it's not correct. There's no such thing as first annual. It's an
Oh.
inaugural. So you are, by the way, anybody with an AP style book next to their bed will bless you for the way you release that.
I didn't even know we got that right. Good. Good for us.
And you're a journalist, and you didn't know. Rebuild Local News is the organization. Steven Waldman, thank you for your 5th appearance on the program. Stay in touch with us.
Do I get a coat? Do I get a blazer?
Not yet. We still got to find the funds for those. I'm going to go out to the philanthropic world. And
Maybe you could get a government grant.
And Gordon Burrell and all the others that have been on regulars on this program. And of course,
Well,
you just have a great afternoon. Thank you, sir.
The honor is sufficient.